Hey, everybody, welcome back to the I Believe podcast. I'm your host, Danae, and I'm here with Shana, who is from Canada. And guys, she is one of my absolute favorite people on the planet. So I'm so freaking happy you're here, Shana. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me, Danae. I'm really happy to be here. I'm doing great today. I had good
I know.
news and yeah, things are good right now.
Okay, so to give you guys a little bit of a background about Shanna, Shanna is currently a metastatic patient living with stage 4 cancer, right? She's also from Canada, and we're going to talk about how that kind of plays into her story. She's also been part of a couple of clinical trials that, if I'm remembering correctly, they both have been in the States, right? You've traveled
Yes.
to come to the USA for these clinical trials. So, for those of you guys who are international patients, or if you're listening and you know somebody who's an international patient, please hit the share button, hit the like button, comment below which country you're from, because it's so important that, especially the people that are running these clinical trials, that they know there are international patients who want to come to the States or vice versa, right? If there was a clinical trial somewhere else, like in Germany, and I wanted to go to it, I would want the people in Germany to know, hey, you need to make this as simple as possible for those of us who are trying to get to you in whatever direction you're going. Shanna, let's talk about your story. Let's like go back not to the crazy beginning, like not all the
Yeah.
way, not I say crazy, but not to like all the way when your eye was diagnosed, because I know that there's just a lot to cover. But let's cover from metastatic journey on. So walk us through that summer that I'm going to say was like a summer from
Oh, it was
the
not a
deep dark
pretty summer.
place.
Yeah. That was a tough summer. So I actually had my MRI on June 5th, and any other Canadian listening might know public health care, it sometimes takes a while. It took 15 days for me to get my report in my portal. And I happened to have an appointment with my doctor that day. Of course, I always open them ahead of time. I think some people do, some people don't, but I want to know what I'm walking into. So I opened it and then fell to the floor. That was, I had 1.8 centimeter lesion on my liver. So called my husband, and then we went into the appointment together. I'd been handling these on my own, and then that one we decided we needed to go in together. We talked about lots of things that day. Uh, of course, I needed a biopsy to make sure it was metastatic, but we knew, uh, we knew it was
Well, and
it was
you had a
metastatic
class
disease.
two. I mean, did you have the Castle test or the biopsy showing that your eye was at the highest risk of metastases, or like how did that work in from Canada?
So I was never offered the Castle that genetic profiling, but because my eye was enucleated, they took it and did many things to it. So
Okay.
I knew that I was BAP1, and I knew that I'm GNA 11, and I
Lots
think
of the
that's
high
all I know.
risk factors.
Yeah, and my tumor was big. I was never offered brachytherapy. I was only offered enucleation. So um, it wasn't great to begin with, but yeah. So
So you guys knew that this was metastatic disease. You were pretty solidly confident going into that doctor's appointment after seeing the scan results,
yeah, and we walked
even
in
without the
there.
biopsy.
Yes, and we walked in because it's the Canadian system can be very slow. I don't know how I managed to get a biopsy later that week. That's unheard of.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think I got a cancellation. I was very active, and I've been very active in my journey and pushing things forward. But we went in and said, like, what are our options? What am I looking at? I didn't even know my HLA status yet. That I think that took 2 to 3 weeks for me to know what my HLA status was. Tebentafusp is approved in Canada, so that was the one that they were pushing if I was HLA positive. If I was HLA negative, it was we don't have immunoembolization, so it would have been either ablation or surgical resection was what we were looking at. Um, so we kind of continued. We went in and said, like, give us the options. We heard about some other trials that were starting, the Trisalis trial. So this is 2023, July of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So there was the Trisalis trial that was supposed to come to Canada. There was the a TIL trial that was supposed to come to Canada. And then they also mentioned the F106C, which is now Brenetafusp, and Tebi
Mm-hmm.
trial. And that one kind of caught our ear. We heard from my team that it would cost a lot of money to come to the States to do something like that. So we kind of put it on the back burner, because I wasn't willing to bankrupt my family for something that's not 100% or 90% or 80.
Yeah, like something
or,
that didn't have some solid numbers behind it, for sure.
Yeah, you need to be pretty sure that this is going to work before you're going to spend the kind of money they were talking about. So we kind of continued on through the summer, getting scans, biopsy, found out I was HLA positive, and then we were waiting. We were told that the trial was coming to Canada.
I hate waiting.
So it was a lot of waiting that summer. So we kept going through July, and then I hit August, and I just remember being like, nothing's happened.
I remember you messaging me. Like, you messaged me on Facebook, and you're like, what is happening? Is this normal? Like, did you have to wait this long? Like, you were beside yourself.
Well, and I feel like I had I could go back and look, but I had a lot of scans in that 6 to 8 week period to the end of the summer, and just things were growing, and they were growing fast. So I was panicking. So I reached out, and I reached out to Dr. Sato's office in Philadelphia, and they took me to their round table and talked about it, and came back and presented. They thought that I should be eligible for immunoembolization direct to the liver. Of course, we don't have that in Canada. They also recommended one of the doctors that they've worked with before that is actually on my team here. Looked at surgical resection. Once we found out I had more than one tumor, I was no longer a candidate for surgery. I booked an ablation, and I was still waiting for the trial to come. So I waited about another week after that, and then I reached out direct to the trial in Pittsburgh at UPMC Hillman. And I reached, you go on the clinicaltrial.gov website, and you find your trial, and then you find what location you want to go to, and then you call or you email, and that's what I did. So I heard from Dr. Luke, actually called me the next day, and that's unheard of in my world. In Canada.
Amazing.
We don't get that. So we talked briefly about it. At the time, he mentioned the F106C trial and also the somatics trial that he was more interested in putting me on, but I didn't qualify for that one yet. Things were growing rapidly, though, and September 20th, I had my ablation on the two largest spots, and they were now, so from 0.8 in June, I believe I was close to not being able to get an ablation. I was about 2.8 centimeters in one.
They were pretty large compared to in June.
They were growing, and yes, they ballooned. I had at that point I had 2 and a third that was popping up that was too small to ablate at the time, or I think it was the location by my gallbladder that they wouldn't have been able to ablate. And I also had multiple foci lesions. So now we're in a space where that 3-month period for me, I'm full of it now.
You went from I have the one tiny lesion that I remember you messaging me, and I was like, "Hey, Shana, don't panic. It's going to be okay. You have one tiny lesion." And then the next couple weeks you're like, "It's more. It's growing." And I'm like, "Oh, crap. This is everybody's worst nightmare in uveal melanoma, to be honest. This is what the doctors talk about." You were at least what I've heard from multiple doctors, you were kind of a classic case of metastatic uveal melanoma, where you had one lesion, and then very shortly later it had grown and also had friends, and then all of a sudden it set up camp and it was making babies.
Yep, there was a lot. There was and it was doubling every time I had a scan. Minimum, it was and then each
and that's
one.
So scary, especially when you're stuck in that spot of I'm just waiting, nothing has happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had the ablation, though, and that didn't disqualify you from the FM160 trial?
Yeah, the F106C trial, I was able to have an ablation and still continue on that. So we hadn't gone down to Pittsburgh yet because I have 4 kids and there was a lot going on. It was the start of school. So we we actually had booked to go October 9th to go and sign and meet them. If I could talk to, if I could give anyone any advice, is don't wait. I shouldn't have waited. I should have gone down at the beginning of September and signed. I am so lucky and fortunate and grateful that it worked the way it did, but I could have lost my spot. If there's a spot for you and you're eligible for that trial, do not wait. Get there. That would be my message on that one.
Okay, so that's super important. Oh, okay.
We signed for 2 trials that day, thinking whatever. I signed for the F106C TEBI trial. The nice part was tebentafusp is in Canada. F106C was not in Canada at the time. I knew I was in there for weekly infusions. We figured all that out. And then I also at the time, so October 9th, 2023, I signed for the Amatics trial. That's it. Put that in a little box, pretend that. So, and then I started.
So wait, hold on. You signed for the trial, but you weren't on it yet.
So
right?
That, I must be the luckiest unlucky person in the world, because doing that signing October 9th, somehow
of
I
2023.
had a thought of 2023 is the reason I'm on, is the reason I had Amatics at this point, from what I understand. Now, maybe that they had a slot in 2024, but I had signed. So, and that is 100% the team at UPMC. They wanted me to sign both, and I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but if someone offers you to sign up for 2 trials, you just say yes. That's my other advice. Just sign up. So we had, so then I started F106C and TEBI in Pittsburgh, and we were traveling. So the drive is it says 4.5, but it's usually between 5 and 6 hours. And we were going weekly. So I would leave on Monday, have my treatment Tuesday, and then we would come home Tuesday night. So it was a lot.
And was this, so the F, I'm saying it wrong, F1060?
F106C, they call it praying.
F106C as in the letter C?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm hearing it correctly, and also so that for our subtitles it picks it up correctly. So F106C, letter C.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you were going, and were you going every week?
Yeah, it was weekly treatment, same as TEBI.
Okay.
Is
yeah, because I know TEBI is weekly.
Yeah. So it was every week. We went, my kids and I ate Christmas dinner at the Get-Go. I don't know if anyone's in Pennsylvania, but our favorite gas station, that was where we had Christmas dinner that year, because I had treatment on the 26th. So we got in the car after Christmas morning and drove to Pittsburgh. So I continued, and all along I'd still been told that this trial was coming to Canada. There were going to be uveal melanoma spots in Canada, and that I would be able to just transfer back. And I was told it wasn't my responsibility to figure that out. It was Toronto team to figure out how to do that. It ended up being that Pittsburgh, they are magical. They started the process with Immunocore. Immunocore is amazing, and they ended up moving me up to Canada in the beginning of February. So I had November, December, January, 4-ish, 3.5, 4 months of travel every week to Pittsburgh.
I feel like we just want to let that sit and absorb for a minute. Weekly travel, like driving for 5 to 6 hours with someone and or your whole family. That's a lot.
It was a lot.
I mean, I remember you were very, you were very committed to doing this, but I also remember you were like, I don't have time for anything else.
Yeah.
Like this is it. This is my life.
Yeah. I would come home and it would be catching up. We couldn't have done it without my in-laws. They were here. We celebrated birthdays in the hospital. Like there was lots, but, I think, it was the best shot I had at that time. That was, it wasn't just Tebby, it was another chance. And the numbers that were coming back from the trial were like 50%. And I was like, I gotta take it.
That's a pretty good efficacy. And so the 50% efficacy means it has roughly a 50% chance of being solidly effective.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's, I mean, I know we could get into the nitty gritty of breaking down some of the words around trials, but that's kind of the layman's terms around efficacy, is how well does it work?
Yeah.
And that's a hopeful number, especially in uveal melanoma. I mean, it'd be great if it was like 90%, but I don't know that we have very many options that say that yet. We're getting there.
I think we're coming, but I think it's time.
It's coming.
Right? It's coming.
Absolutely. It's so time. Oh my God. So time. Okay, so I want to just pause for a minute before we move on past this point. So you've been on the trial for 4 months. It finally moved from the US, where you were required to travel to come and have the medication every week, by the way, which is not the case for every trial. Some trials it's different, but for this unique trial, it was every week, coming from Canada to the States.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then on top of that, then it was the waiting period and the expectation that this would eventually move to Canada in Toronto, where you would have the chance to stay close to home. And how close, like to you, how close is Toronto even, just going to that center?
I refuse to drive in Toronto with one eye, so I take the train. It's about an hour and a half each way for me to get there. So
I mean, that's still easy. More travel than most people. If you live near a center of excellence, like close, we say close, like I live 40 minutes from my doctor.
Okay.
And I'm super lucky. I recognize that. Most people are not that lucky. But if you live close to a center of excellence in the United States, I feel like it's usually less than an hour, at least if you're actually close.
It would be if I drove, but the traffic and one eye.
The train is longer.
I refuse.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's shorter a lot of the time too.
Yeah, that's true. And so it eventually moved. The trial itself moved to Canada. Which, did that actually make your life easier at that point? Like, how did that feel when you were actually staying home?
So the trial didn't move to Canada. The drug moved to Canada with me, is what I understand.
Oh, gotcha. The drug moved, but the trial didn't officially have other spots for other people.
So they opened the trial, but they opened it for ovarian cancer. So I think they were I don't know what the status of that trial is. I haven't looked back to see where it's at now, but they had moved to, they had moved to ovarian cancer. We, in Uveal, unfortunately, didn't have access to it anymore. But I don't know how effective it is in Uveal anyway. I think they were seeing better results in other cancers. My travel time was almost the same, to be honest. Funny, like my days were almost as long. Every third, so like depending on the trial, in Pittsburgh, they were amazing. I would show up in the morning, I would get my blood work, I'd go for a walk, I'd come back, and I'd get treated. And depending on the time, there was, different wait times between different IV infusions and all those things. But eventually they were so fast, I would get, I'd be started and be out by noon. I started at 7 a.m. and I'm done by noon, and then we're on our way home. So Toronto, we wait a lot. They have a system where you wait with this pager, and the pager goes off sometimes after 15 minutes.
Come when your table's ready.
And it's exactly that. This is when your chair's ready. It would be sometimes 3-4 hours I would be waiting, and that's just a function of public health care sometimes. Sometimes I think it was because I needed a certain nurse if they hadn't dealt with a trial before, like I needed a clinical trial nurse, because I was in chemo daycare is what they call it. So I was getting treatment with all the other cancer patients, whether they're on regular chemo or trial or, So it did get better for sure. We had from February until kind of my scans in July, and then things started going south again. So
yeah, I remember that summer you were like, summer freaking sucks. Like, why? Why it's always summer? Why is it always summer?
Yeah, my eye was removed in summer. My fat graft was in summer. My Mets diagnosis, we've had it. Yeah,
It was all in
yeah.
summer. Yeah. Ugh.
It's
Okay,
always
so
been summer.
eventually this, I mean, it did move, at least medication wise. You were able to have the treatment in Canada for a time.
Yeah.
And that is a plus, but it sounds like it came more because of the US team than it did because of the Canada team. Or do you
So
think I mean, do you just not know for sure what the logistics were behind the scenes?
I don't know the logistics. I do know that the Canadian system is data driven. That's what
Mm.
my team has told me in Toronto. And so if there isn't a lot of data around something, which is anyone with a rare cancer, they aren't necessarily going to push to get it to Canada because if they only have 5 people on it, that's not going to be where their focus or their goal is. So
Yeah.
uh, unfortunately, I think that's where we stand in Canada is a bit of an issue around like we have Health Canada, and then there's another regulatory agency, and then each of the provinces has their own, like your states, right, has their
Mhm.
own healthcare, and because we're publicly funded, our healthcare is like Ontario, not Canada wide. So yeah, I don't know how we fix
So,
that.
I mean, I don't know how we fix it either, but it's like you're doomed if you do and you're doomed if you don't. Like because we as patients with a rare cancer in the states or in any other country, we already don't have very much data, right? And we're in the process of doing clinical trials, and there's the few treatments that are FDA approved now in the states that are providing some extra data to drive Kimtrack and to drive Hepzato. Like those are the two main approved treatments that we have. That's it. Like aside from a microwave ablation, which is not unique to uveal melanoma, and arguably some doctors don't even like doing ablations or things like that because they're like, we can't prove that it works in uveal melanoma. And it's like, well, you can't prove that much works in uveal melanoma at this point. So what do you have to lose here other than to help a patient and give them hope? And isn't that such an important thing, being a patient and having hope? And I just want to illustrate or draw attention to the fact that despite all of these things that kept happening and stacking up against Shana and her family and for her care, like you guys, she has had the most tenacious view of what she and I like to call rebellious hope, like that I have ever seen.
Aura Biosciences is a clinical stage biotechnology company focused on developing precision therapies for solid tumors that aim to preserve organ function. Our lead candidate, Belsar, is currently in late stage development for primary choroidal melanoma and in early stage development in other ocular oncology indications and bladder cancer. Our mission is to grow as an innovative global oncology company that positively transforms the lives of patients. For more information, please visit us at aurabiosciences.com.
Yes, I know. We got to show our tattoos. Let's show them. So hers is all on her arm, and you can actually read hers. Mine is backwards, but it says "Rebellious Hope" on my collarbone. Um, and that has been. I mean, if we have you guys walk away from this episode taking anything, it's just this idea. I think it's just this idea that it is possible in the face of a lot of adversity to have that kind of hope. So, Shanna, before we continue on your story, why don't you just tell us, what does rebellious hope mean to you? Because I feel like it's kind of a little bit of an abstract concept.
It is, and sometimes I have to like Google to like put it into perspective. But like I would call it just like not giving up, like not sit in your hole. I sit in a hole sometimes, but coming out fighting and like not giving up. We didn't give up. I am blessed and grateful. We have family who are so helpful, and because I mean we could not have done it without my in-laws and my sister, and my aunt is helping out financially a bit. Like we couldn't have done it. So it's yeah, but it's that I don't that rebellious hope of just not giving up. My husband and I, these were our first tattoos. My husband actually has a matching one, and we got them. We were in Toronto on a day where when I met with a surgeon who said he would no longer, because of my MRI came back, I was no longer eligible for surgery on my liver. And we walked out of Princess Margaret and walked down Queen Street and found this like dive tattoo shop and went in, and we both got our first tattoos there. So, yeah. I mean, we had a horrible meeting and we walked out, and it ended up being such a good memory. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the epitome of rebellious hope. I think that in that moment, your choice to go and get this tattoo was a literal middle finger to cancer and to the situation and to everything that was up against you. And to your point, you said that, that it's a lot about, for you, it's a lot about not giving up. I think it's about not giving up even when you want to. Like, even when, like, deep down, you're so defeated and you're so frustrated by everything that you're coming up against, all of the obstacles, right? Because those obstacles don't just stop existing because you choose to have this kind of rebellious hope. It's literally that you decide, okay, I'm climbing out of the hole, I'm throwing up the middle finger, and I'm moving on. Yep. Like, that is what I feel like I've watched you do time and time again, and I wish that you had not had to do it so often. I know that we've talked a lot about the frustration of just how much more complicated and difficult this has been because of your international status and because of the lack of available options to you in Canada. Like, and it's frankly, like, numbers wise, as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure if we were to do a quick Google search of how many people get diagnosed with uveal melanoma in the States versus in Canada per year,
I feel like we're about 250 to 300 a year.
So yeah, like, you guys you're right. You're like a pin in the bucket, like a drop in the bucket. And that makes the aspects of public health care that are already challenging even more challenging. I hope we're not sounding like we're slamming public health care. I'm sure that there are some unique benefits to public health care, but in the case of a rare disease, there's a lot to come up against in terms of trying to get care and trying to get care that's actually got a chance at helping you, especially for a disease that doesn't have many options. I mean, we don't have anything curative at this point, at least not concretely across the board. And so, we need these options. We need those trials. And I have long admired your persistence in pursuing, finding what you felt the best about, but also choosing to participate in a clinical trial, because it's not an easy choice.
Called myself the lab rat for a long time. I don't feel like a lab rat anymore, though.
That's good. Okay, so we've paused, we've reflected, but now let's resume, because the rest of this story is, honestly, you guys, it's probably one of the reasons I felt like I could get up today and be excited to talk to Shana, especially in light of what happened for me in my community in the local area that I live yesterday and this week. So, Shana, you get to the summer, you have scans. Yeah. And summer of 2024, these scans are not great. They're not great.
So they're fine. Originally, the one tumor that I'd had left, so I had those ablations, then I had small foci lesions, and then I had one that was, I think it was 0.9 at the time. When I was scanned in January, now I was getting scans at two different places sometimes, so there was measuring issues. That's always that's probably one of the harder parts, is you're never sure. And it had come down to 0.6. So I was like, hooray, it's working, we're good. I had some scans in March, they were fine. And then we came to my June scans again. And of course, I'm seeing growth, and they're seeing more lesions. And so I would have been right around the beginning of July. And I said, like, I wasn't happy. I'm like, this isn't going to be long-term now. Like, I don't want to stay on this.
For sure.
I mean, I could have probably stayed and had growth. We don't know what it would have looked like, but I was like, well, I know the drill. It's only been I didn't even get a year on it. I started October 30th. So here I am in July looking. So I sat in my hole for a bit, like I like to call it, and then I got out and got my rebellious hope, plastered on, and I called Dr. Luke again at UPMC Hillman, and I was like, I don't know if I'm still eligible. He called me, actually, I was not having a treatment day. We chatted for a bit. In the summer, there were some changes happening with the IMA 203 trial from what I understand. So we were kind of in a waiting period, but they knew that I was interested again. We needed to find out my PRAME status of the tumor in my liver. I needed to go down and do leukapheresis. If anyone, that's where they take out your white blood cells, package them up and send them away. So I needed to go and get that done. So that's kind of where we started working. It was slow because I didn't get, this is the beginning of July. I got down to Pittsburgh for the first time middle of September. So I went down, had my leukapheresis, and we were still waiting for the PRAME status of my tumor. So,
and this was the liver tumor biopsy.
This is my liver tumor. Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, it's your liver tumor. Never mind. Your eye was enucleated.
Well, they can still pull up my eye. It's sitting in a jar somewhere, I think. But, yeah, so it's my liver tumor, but it wasn't quite big enough. We had to wait for it to grow, right? We're in this, like, 0.9 isn't enough. So we're waiting for it to grow enough to get, and I guess things happened. October 18th, I went down to Pittsburgh. I'd had my scans in Toronto, and they did a biopsy. By now, I have 3 or 4 lesions. They were, one was over a centimeter, and the other couple were, 0.8, 0.6. They took 11 core samples that day in 3 different spots. And I think it was they weren't looking at their MRI, they were looking at the Toronto MRI. They couldn't get it. And I remember the radiologist was amazing. As I'm lying on my side waiting for it to be done, and he's like, I'm so sorry I couldn't get it. I don't know if this is your experience, but this is not a Canadian experience. In my room, there was like 10 people when I'm going to get my biopsy. It was incredible. There were nurses, there was the radiologist, there was another doctor, my research coordinator was standing there, and they had a pathologist in that was looking at the cells to see if they could see if they got
in real time.
In real time, I'm watching it on the thing, and I'm seeing the pathologist go, no.
Yeah, like, no. This is not cancerous tissue. Nice try, try again.
Yeah. So 11 tissue samples, and they didn't get it. So that was a drive home from, that was a very low point. I reached out to my Toronto team and said, do you have tissue from the original biopsy you took back in July of 2023? Remarkably, they did. So we ended up sending that tissue to Pittsburgh. But let's be clear, what should have been a week process took 6 weeks because something got lost in the shuffle. Pittsburgh is talking to Toronto, and I'm trying to talk to Toronto and Pittsburgh and make sure that things are getting coordinated, and something happened. And my request sat for 6 weeks on somebody's desk. So now we're at like November 18th, I believe, November 30th maybe, and they get the tissue. It goes to Texas, to the Emetics headquarters in the U.S., and thank goodness I was PRAME positive. So we booked to go and start the trial December 27th. That was the earliest we could do it. I finished my last infusion of Tebi and F106C on December 16th. And then kind of had a week off. We actually had Christmas morning and dinner at my house, and then we left on the 26th to go down to Pittsburgh. So yeah, and then we did IMA 203.
You had a lot of waiting, especially in this particular period. I mean, I know you had a lot of waiting lots of times, but in this particular period, you had a lot of. I just remember you talking to me about this, and I was just like flabbergasted. Like, how could they? And you were so confused too, because it was like, how could they have PRAME positive on this tissue, but then like somehow they can't get it over here? Like, it was just mind-boggling. But also, like you said, it turned out to be a little bit of a gift that somehow Toronto still had the sample stored, and that they could use that for the trial eligibility. That all panned out. I don't think I realized that you continued doing the F106C trial. Like, you continued doing that basically right up to when you started Emetics. I do want to give a disclaimer here. The unfortunate thing about the Emetics trial right now is that as far as we know, Shanna, do you know, are they still taking uveal melanoma patients, or were you one of the last uveal patients to get on the trial for the moment?
I was the last patient on the phase 1B trial, from what I understand. I'm data point number 33 in the world.
In the world.
In the world.
The lab rat status, number 33.
The lab rat status continues. From what I understand is they are hoping to open for 30 uveal melanoma slots. But I mean, like, fingers crossed and everything.
Everybody
crossed.
Put it out there. Okay, so we're excited about this for a good reason. Like, let's just give that out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I will say, while we're talking about that, so the actual, like, IMA 203 has now moved on to a phase 3 trial, and they chose to do it in cutaneous. And I've talked about it. I haven't talked about it with Maddox, but I talked about it with a few oncologists. And the reason is that cutaneous melanoma has better options for standard of care. So when you're in a randomized phase 3 trial, you want to have reasonable options for your people that you're putting into it. Just that we don't want to end up with, like, because uveal only has TEBI really in the, like, HLA positive or PHP depending, but for a systemic treatment, they have to randomize in, and they had to push it to cutaneous because they're trying to keep people alive.
Well, which is a good reason. I mean, it's frustrating. It is frustrating because it's like, oh, they shut down the trial, or, you know, they didn't continue doing it for uveal, but it's also at the moment probably better for them not to do a phase 3 because, like you said, phase 3 requires that comparative. These people get the for sure, like the drug, the new drug, and these people get the standard of care. And it's not great to have one that potentially could work really great, but then have the other people get one that might be a crapshoot. Like, for them, it just depends. Like, it might work really, really well. There's some people who respond super, super well to some of the immunotherapies, right? Ipi-Nivo, Opdualag, and even Kimtrak. There's some people who respond well and who have great stability or response. But there's a lot of people who don't. And that is one of the challenges that we come up against in a phase 3 trial for sure.
And the other piece is, at least in the 1B, like a phase 1 trial, they needed to you needed to have tried something that was standard of care. So when I went I was accepted in the phase 1 trial of the F106C because it was TEBI plus something. So assuming you're going to get the benefit of TEBI, and then also
which is
whatever
a standard of care option. Okay.
Yeah.
So you check 2 boxes basically.
Yeah. And then when I moved on to the Maddox trial, I had already had a standard of care TEBI and it wasn't working. So that's where,
Okay. So what was this? I mean, are you allowed to talk about this treatment? Let's just momentarily double check that. Are you allowed to talk about the actual treatment that you had, and what it was briefly, just what it was like?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it was. I mean, it was amazing, but I mean, just give us. We don't have to go into the major nitty gritty of how did it work, all of that. I know you had the lymphodepleting period where they did chemo, right? So maybe walk us through. Okay, you signed. Well, you had already signed. You signed back in 2023, but you got to actually move forward at the end of December, beginning of January of 2025. So now we're fast forward. It's been a year and a half almost since your original metastatic discovery. Is that right on the timeline? Yeah. Okay, so walk us through the treatment, because you had the treatment and it was not at all the same as your previous ones. You had TEBI, and the F106C trial was weekly infusions, and this was very different. So walk us through that.
So this one's super different. I checked into the hospital. They told me 2 to 3 weeks was what I was going to stay. So you have I was over Christmas, so I had 4 days of leukodepleting chemo, which was fine. Honestly, I was still getting up and walking around, and we were just waiting for my counts to come, they had to go down to 0. And then on January 2nd, so spent a fair bit of time alone. I sent my husband home with the kids on, like, I checked in on the 27th. They visited me on the 28th, and then I was like, you guys need to go. Like, they didn't need to stay. So I was on my own there, and then my husband came back on the 1st to be there for when my new cells came in on January 2nd. That was a wild
so they
day.
did the lympho,
Yeah,
they did the lymphodepleting chemo,
Yeah.
and the goal was to have your, like, how do they have cells to give you? Like, where do those cells come from?
Oh, so back in September when I did my leukapheresis, they take out the cells. The cells
gotcha.
they go to Texas, they modify them. I don't even want to attempt to discuss what they do to them. I just call them my
They
genetically
supercharged
engineered.
them. That's all they did.
Sure.
They supercharged those cells.
Yeah.
We're gonna just say that. It's fine.
Whatever they did, I'm so thankful. Like, yeah.
For sure.
So, and then they come back to you in the billions. So they've grown them. So I had 5 or 6 bags, and because I was on the phase 1B trial, they kept escalating the dose of what you were getting back. I think that the IMA 203 is now called Anzucel, like ANZU-CEL, as the drug. They call it the drug, even though it's your own cells. And so I had 8 billion cells put in, which, if anyone makes me think of.
So you were on the pretty high end then of their dose escalation of, like, how many cells are they going to give you? Like, were you on the highest that they were doing at that point?
At that point, I was the person that had the most. I think the person who went after me was on this phase. I think she might be 1B, but she's cutaneous, so it's different the way she, I think, may have stepped up again. Yeah. But I'd had the most.
So you got bags and bags of these cells that were then administered in the hospital. How long did it take? I mean, was it one day?
It was 4 hours, I think. It was yeah. And nothing kind of happened. Nothing happened.
Yeah, you're just sitting there like, thank you, yay cells.
Yay cells. And then into the evening stuff started happening. Like, I was on interleukin 2 as well. Like, they give that to you a couple of days after you have your cells. So, like, muscle pain, like, I was so tired. To be honest, I think there's like a 6-week period in there. I don't remember much of anything, like how I was functional. So I ended up, my neutrophil count came back up faster than they thought it was going to. So I got released after 2 weeks and came home. I was on a number of giant drugs. They keep you on an antibiotic, and antifungal, and an antiviral. So I was on those for, depending on which one it was. Some of them were 3 months, some of them were like 60 days, but a long time. And then, And then
So you had all of this stuff happen, and I know that technically there's more. Like, and unfortunately, I don't want us to like go into the nitty gritty of some of the more, like, everything else that happened, because with what you had happen, essentially they amped up your immune system, like, really, really, really powerfully. And so, the fallout from that was a number of various different immune responses that you had. And those are good signs in an immunotherapy, correct? Like, that you want to have an immune response because it means your immune system is turned on. And I am summarizing what I have learned from doctors, so please don't take this as medical advice. Please talk to your own doctors and ask questions, right? That's a really big thing about self-advocacy, is ask questions. Learn how these kinds of medicines work if you're, contemplating any of these trials that Shana has mentioned or others. So that's my disclaimer. But you had all this happen. You said it was about was it actually the full 6 weeks that you were expecting? Or no, you said it was 2 to 3 weeks of time that they were going to have you in the hospital. And they released you a little bit earlier than planned because your counts came back up. You went home. You had a 6-week blackout period somewhere in the mix of that, like combined or together. And you had various different symptoms. You kind of were dealing with the fallout of, the literal fallout, because I know you had to deal with hair loss after the chemo. That's one of the downsides to having any of these kinds of procedures or these kinds of treatments, is that if you have a lymphodepleting period, like TIL or like this trial, that you are going to lose your hair, which I think is more commonplace to happen in cancer. And so then when uveal melanoma patients don't have treatments that happens with, then they're like, well, what are they doing for you then? I know that you went through a lot, right? You went through a lot in the waiting period from the beginning of January to now. Here we are, it's October, and you had summer scans. And what happened this summer? Because I feel like I remember this summer being significantly better than previously.
Yeah, so and now I'm on a 3-month scan protocol, and I went down in July. This would be the first summer, so this is our 5th summer with uveal melanoma, and we actually had a great summer. I went down in July, and I had at the time I had a 0.5 centimeter tumors left. That was it.
And you had previous scans after the trial, right? So they had checked in multiple times before July.
Yeah, and so now I was 61% less cancer in my liver, and no other cancer overall. I just had scans middle of September, and I'm now 84% less cancer in my liver, because that's where it all was anyway. So yay.
And so that's, I mean, it's huge. It's so hopeful.
Castle Biosciences is a proud sponsor of this I Believe podcast. Castle's innovative uveal melanoma tests provide valuable information about the risk of your eye cancer spreading to help you and your healthcare team individualize the management of your disease. To learn more, visit castlebiosciences.com.
I talk about it with my therapist a lot. There's this weird, I kind of feel a little bit guilty, like, because it's so good. And I feel for everyone else in the uveal melanoma space who's dealing with, like, if you're not HLA positive, you can't have this. If you're, if
you're HLA positive but not PRAME positive, you can't have this. Like, yeah.
So it's just like, it's this kind of guilt and how to deal with it and feel like I'm so happy and grateful and thankful. And I mean, there's lots more to my story, but it does feel sometimes like I don't always shout it from the rooftops because I don't want anyone else to feel bad. But I have to remember how I felt when I would hear good news from other people. I always think good news is worth sharing, especially in our space, because it does give everybody some more rebellious hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I was just talking with one of the other patients who I'm actually going to have her on the podcast in a few weeks. And she is a counselor, and she specifically focuses a lot, especially in the times that she's spoken to our community, about grief. And she talks about this idea that, really, she just talks a lot about the importance of honoring grief and the grieving process of having a cancer diagnosis, not just the grieving of somebody you lose, right, or somebody who passes away. And she's been really good at articulating some of the grief that happens and the ups and downs that we feel as patients. And I want to talk to her about the importance of collective or community felt grief, right? That we feel it. When somebody who has uveal melanoma passes away because they ran out of options or their body just was done taking to those options, like, who knows, whatever the reason for their passing away, we feel that loss as a whole community, whether or not you actually know the person personally or not. It doesn't seem to matter. Like, I think that we do feel it. And I shared a post about a friend who passed away this week, and I can't tell you how many. I mean, there's hundreds of people interacting with, posts and shares and just saying like that we are grieving as uveal melanoma patients. We're grieving that loss. But on the flip side, I do find it so helpful and so important that we also share in the collective hope. And I think that when people like you, Shana, are able to share the good news when it happens, that we then as a community get to share in that collective rebellious hope.
For sure.
And that's a gift. But I understand the complexity of I'm doing well and somebody that I love isn't.
It's hard. It's and I'm it's just managing that. So I've kind of taken on a little bit trying to help some other Canadian patients have access to things because we don't have immunoembolization, we don't have histotripsy, we don't have Delcath.
Yeah.
We have very few options.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we all have few options, but this is, So
it's significantly more limited for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, an amazing thing happened. Someone in Ontario got approved to get Hepzato in Florida. So that paid for by the government, which is amazing. And so I think it's that whole, I hope as we move forward, more people start kind of making the headway, because I mean, I know other cancers, people who have gone to the States to do clinical trials and things, but I think for us as Uveal, we need to start hey, we're here, and we're not going to get things. Well, we're not going to get things to Canada if we're not pushing the government and no, hey, look over here. We want these things too.
That's something that I know that you have wanted to do. You've wanted to advocate in that space. On a larger scale level, and just to make noise in Canada for uveal melanoma. You've wanted to do that for a long time, but dealing with everything you've been dealing with, side effects, all of the ups and downs with your own treatments, kind of never having a break. I want to emphasize to anybody listening, it's so important that if you're in that space where you're in active treatment, you're dealing with a lot of the ups and downs and the roller coaster that is having a metastatic diagnosis. It is okay if you don't have the capacity to advocate on a larger space for more than just yourself. But I would say, and Shana, you can correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but I would say that now that you're to a point that you have the ability to do that you find a lot of purpose, and you find a lot of, I don't want to say satisfaction, but just that you are driven, and that your drive stems from the desire to help other people, so that hopefully there's more yous, right? There's more people like you who are able to land in the right trial for them, and who get a solid treatment option, and who then also have easier access to what is standard of care in the United States for uveal melanoma. And I think that's a fight worth fighting.
For sure. And I mean, there's been a lot of times where I mute Facebook groups because I can't handle the ups and downs of everybody else. And I have to, even now, even though I'm here and where I am here, there's still periods of time where I just can't put myself in that space because it's too hard. There's a triggering something, it's a lot. But if we had to take one thing in this podcast and share, would be just try. Because I think we're told by your team it's going to cost so much money, they're never going to accept you, the barriers are too much, how are you going to pay, blah, it stacks up. And I will say right now that although I've paid for my travel, my food and hotel when I've been away, I did not pay for thousands of dollars. I have a little tiny pot of $5,000 that sits in a reservoir at UPMC Hillman for whatever. I don't know. That wouldn't even cover anything. But I am getting my scans in Canada now because the sponsor isn't paying for those. But I don't know. Just don't let the fear of trying something or all these answers, because you just don't know. You don't know what you might be able to get. Maybe.
No, I love that. I think, like you said, it's, and if there's any good hopeful way to end, I think it's just maybe that we also tie in the fact that trying, that really is the definition of rebellious hope, right? That you're trying, you're showing up even when you're scared. And even when you're being told, oh no, all of these, whether it's because of statistics or because doctors are worried about the logistics of it, if you're being told all these reasons why you shouldn't, if there's some instinct in your body and your brain that's saying, no, I should push for this, I should try, that it sounds like it's, I mean, Shana, you believe it's absolutely worth it. At a minimum, to just try to push for what you want and go from there and adjust and pivot and change course, as it comes up. But it sounds like the pursuit of getting care, even though you had to come to the States, and it sounds like the ways that you had to try to get here were all worth it.
1,000%. I mean, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would tell anyone to do it if, I mean, I'm super lucky. I found the thing that's working for me right now anyway, but it was worth it all. And I missed a lot of time with my family. We traveled a ton. My one car is not going to make it much longer, but that, it's like small things, right? I'm here now, and I feel pretty good.
And you have the hope, right? You have the hope for the future right now. And that is something you can't exchange that. You can't say, oh, well, having this now somehow wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth all of the things that it took to get to this point. It absolutely was worth it. Was it also hard? Absolutely. And I think that's something that is maybe one of the unfortunate sides of international care, is that it will be hard. But I can also tell you, even if you're staying in the place where you live, it's still going to be hard. There's a phrase of choose your hard, right? Choose the hard that makes the most sense. Choose the hard that feels the best to you. Choose the hard that actually, in your case, has data and has information behind these trials that feels like, okay, that actually gives me a fighting chance. Choose your hard, I think, is a good way to put it.
Totally. Okay. I think, I like that.
Okay.
Choose your hard.
Well, no, I love it. Shana, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for chatting with me and for being not just willing to be a guest on the I Believe podcast, but also for being who you are and just being the friend that you've been to me. I could not have done enucleation or metastatic disease, enucleation and metastatic disease. I could not have done that without you.
Thank you.
I could not have the weekly ups and downs that I have without being able to message you and Brienne. Guys, I have my Canada besties. Brienne and Shana are my Canada besties. I'm not going to lie. And we have all kinds of fun chats, and we send each other memes, and the support, even across, country lines, I feel it every day. And I'm so grateful that I have these women in my life. Shana, thank you for being that person. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for everything that you do for all of us.
All right, guys. Shana, again, thanks for being here. Thanks for being a guest on the I Believe podcast. And huge thank you to our sponsors who make this podcast possible. We would not be able to do this without the support and the funding from Castle Biosciences, Immunocore, Delcath Systems, and Aura Biosciences. Please make sure to subscribe here on YouTube or on our podcast channels. Leave us a review, do the comments, and share these videos with your friends and family, anybody in the Facebook groups, or just, whoever you might know. And frankly, share with your doctors, right? Share these kinds of things with our doctors, because I think it's so important for the doctors to see the patient side of things and to understand our experience. So thanks again for being here. Thanks for sponsoring, and thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys soon.